Now we want to get started with the DNA API. The most common way that this happens is through the incubator program. To be involved in the incubator program, you are required to have actively engaged in development of a software-based product that will form the core of your intended business purpose around behavior. You will be a privately held company in business for less than 3 years and at less than $1 million in annual revenue. If you don't meet these qualifications and you're still excited about using the DNA API, you can contact us at inquiries@dnabehavior.com, and one of our sales agents would be happy to speak with you about getting into one of our more advanced programs. To get started with the DNA incubator, we have a one-time setup cost that's greatly reduced for incubators, and then a monthly subscription that you would pay to be able to access our insights. You also have the option to purchase premium support, which allows you to get phone or web conference support from our team. So here's what happens. Here's how you get into the program. You would send a message to Inquiries with your application and qualification details. Our sales reps should be able to get you that information. If you don't have it, if you send a note to Inquiries, they'll be able to provide you with the application and qualification details. Next, you'll meet with one of our sales team for a 45-minute meeting, and they will qualify you and help you understand the program and understand your goals for using the API. When you get approved, the sales team will send you a special link to sign up for the API. This sign-up process will provide you a link to the sandbox environment. And then when you're ready to move to production, you'll schedule another review meeting with our team. So we'll review your application and make sure that it meets our requirements to go to production. And then once it gets approved, you'll get the link to go to our live production environment and get your application out in the world using our insights and yours to serve your clients. I've mentioned Sandbox a few times. The Sandbox is an environment used to experiment and test applications before they get used by end consumers. So this is where developers can test changes and new features without having live customers trying to pull that data at the same time. The production environment is an environment that's running the live application. It's actually being used by clients and customers, and this is where they interact with your application. So to access to these environments is determined on where you are and also which base URL you're using. So if you're using api.sandbox.dnabehavior.org, that's that sandbox environment. Then there's also another link that would give you the production environment. Now, in the development world, we tend to use lots of language interchangeably. So we have lots of names for similar things or for the same thing. So at DNA, we use sandbox site and production site for our API access, but the sandbox could also be known in your world as a beta test site or a QA or quality assurance site, or the non-prod site, meaning not production, or an incubator site, or potentially the MVP, your minimum viable product test site, or your staging site, or your lower environment. We call it a lower environment because typically code is moved up to production. The production and sandbox environments are completely separate from one another. So data in one environment may or may not exist in the other environment. They're not hooked to each other and they don't do any sort of synchronization. So you have test data in your sandbox environment and live data in your production environment. That production environment could also be known as your live site or production or prod or whatever the app name is, or your main site or your admin system or your main system. So again, depending on which URL you're using to access, you may have several different names for the same site, but at DNA, we have two environments, the sandbox environment and the production environment, regardless of what you call it. And that's kind of the name that we're using for it. So when you're interacting with us, if you use sandbox and production, that'll be a quick win for us that we'll know quickly where you are. If you use one of these other names, this is basically how we think that maps out. In the next section, we're going to talk a little bit more about exactly what it means to start working with the DNA API.